Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. We got a little bit of a review today, and full disclosure, DecoArt sent me these supplies. They contacted me and asked me if I would be willing to review the product for them. And I said sure, but I am not being paid in any way to do this review. So take that for what you will. So I did this little painting with their product, or at least the product that they sent me. And I believe you guys might know them better for the little tubes of paint that they have that you do a lot of one-stroke painting with and whatnot. Obviously it's used for way more, but typically those little tubes of paint are the, or what people typically think of as one-stroke painting when you see them. So I decided I was going to take their paints and put them through their paces, or at least the paints they sent me. And I got a few pros and cons to mention to you guys. I think it is a good product. The only thing about it is, you know, personal preference type stuff. Pros of this paint, it's a really nice paint. I do enjoy it. This was a painting that was completely different before. It was a more abstract painting. And I didn't really like how it turned out, and it never sold and it never caught anybody's eyes. So I decided, all right, well, I'll just paint over it and put this paint through its paces. A lot of people, you may have like messed with yellows, especially if you've ever painted with Grumbacher, which is what I've predominantly used up to this point. I bought it all myself. Where like yellows, it takes multiple layers of yellows to cover up anything or to show anything. It's just very translucent, the yellows and the whites. And this was a painting before as well, and it just has one layer of Grumbacher white over it. You see it in person, you can tell it was a painting before. You can see some of the silhouettes of some of the darker stuff. This was a beginner's class that I was teaching, so it ended up getting stuck in a pile full of things that, okay, I'm going to paint over them later. And, you know, the paint kind of stuck a little bit, even though it seemed dry, but apparently it was still a little bit tacky when I did that. And I'm not sure if you can tell from how I'm moving this around, but you can see this kind of Grumbacher white. There we go, right in here. It has this kind of sheen to it. I always thought it, especially when you start layering and layering and layering white on top of itself, that's when I start noticing it just kind of feels kind of plasticky and waxy. Sorry if that was out of focus there. I got a new phone that I'm recording my videos with, so we got to learn each other. But so yeah, that's what happened with that. Now, obviously I didn't show you step by step me doing this, but with one coat, I mean, that white covered. I was like, well, I only did half of it, covered half of it with the white, and I'm like, all right, well, that goes really, really well. So instead of just doing the whole thing in white and covering the whole thing white, I went ahead and did the white down here, and then I took the blue and I started doing the sky and just blending it down into. And the blue covered, the yellow covers really, really well. The yellow's amazing. The white's amazing. I mean, now the black does have some shine to it because I ended up using a different paint. They did not send me any black or colors that would get close to black. The darkest I could get is this brown here that you see. So I did have to go and get another black to do this painting and kind of see the difference, I hope. I did use metallic paint to do some of it. But other than metallic paint and the black, I hope you can tell that this stuff is super matte. I really like how it finishes in the end. I think it's really nice. It doesn't have that kind of, like how the Grumbacher, when you touch it and you feel it, it kind of feels kind of plastic-esque and kind of cheap feeling. Not that you want people touching your pieces all the time. And it makes a pretty good presentation, I feel, being this nice and matte. So what they sent me the brown, and then I tried to darken it up as much as I could with the red. I wish they had sent me a completely different red, because this red does not make a beautiful orange, which is why this ended up being a super evening sunset piece, because I could not get this to brighten up very much anyway. And that's as closest to the brightest pink I could get without it just going white. And then they sent me the yellows, the whites and the blues. So this is pretty much all they sent me. They did send me some mixing mediums, but, and any of you that's ever messed with mixing mediums, you know what they're for, but those of you that haven't, the mixing mediums, you mix it in with your paint. It's the glue that they kind of use to make the pigments stick. It's pretty much extra glue, so that way you can thin these paints out a little bit without adding water to them. A lot of people don't like to add water, and it allows it to flow better. Honestly, this stuff flows so nicely. They didn't need to send me that, although I will play with it when I get the time and maybe do a couple of one-stroke paintings with it just to see how the product works. So these tubes, I do like these tubes. If you've watched or heard me complain about Grumbacher's new tubes of paint, I hate their caps because within like 3 or 4 times of twisting the cap on and off, the top part of the cap breaks and the thread part stays on, and I'm constantly having to take push pins in the dried part of the paint and sticking it in there as if it was the cap, because the caps just break so easily. And I know I'm not exactly the gentlest person in the world, but I'm not exactly that rough either. So these caps are great. They are very firm. They do a really good job. And you know, the plastic tubes, a lot of people are going, well, it's not those metal tubes, it's not Winsor & Newton, it's not Grumbacher, it's not blah, 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 the big brand names. It's not a metal tube like what they use, but, you know, plastic's a little bit more recyclable. Metal's recyclable too, but you're not going to have to find specialty places to get rid of your tubes. That way, you can, any average recycling place will take these guys. And it's a fairly nice product. It stands straight up. Depending on how you store it, so that way your paint's always ready to come out of the bottom of it. It stands nice and flush, and overall I've always liked these products that hang like this, and we'll get into a con of these being this way in a minute, but all your paint's already at the end of the tube. It's not hard to get it out of it. You don't have to shake it or anything like you do with the little bottles and whatnot, so it's really good packaging. And I have opened and closed, opened and closed, opened and closed these toppers, and I have yet to break them. I kind of put them through a bit of a rigorous pace, but then again, at the same time, you're twisting something on, twisting something off, and then the paint gets on the threads, and it gets harder and harder to twist on, and that's what ends up breaking the top off of the cap. You don't have to worry about that because these are just snap caps. So now we're going to get into the, more or less, the cons of this product. Because it covers so well, if you just mix water with it to try to do a glaze, good luck. It doesn't make for amazing glazes. That's where your downfall comes in for that part of it. But with enough practice, you're working with this product a lot, I'm sure you can get a very satisfactory glaze with it. You can see where I've tried to glaze with this yellow, bringing it down in, and it worked, and it did it. But it takes a little bit. One of the other problems with this paint is unless you leave your painting dry for hours, and I mean 2-3 hours minimum, before you come in and do another layer, you are just going to rehydrate the layer that you would put down, and it's just going to mix. So, I mean, you need to give this paint a good long time. It's almost, in a way, like watercolor. It's very, very forgiving, and you can rehydrate layers within a certain amount of time and rework them if you want to, but the trade-off for that is you got to give it a very, very long drying time before you can put a glaze over the top of it. And it took me a while to figure that out before I finally, the yellow stopped mixing with everything and you can barely see my tree line. It's not necessarily a flaw of the product, but it's something just to get used to, like most pros and cons are. Next big con I felt with this product, and again, it's more of a getting used to the product because I never used this before, because it flows so well. And it's a lot like their tubes, their tube paints that, you know, It's not that it's liquidy. I mean, it covers really well. It's not that it's like watered down or anything, but it is a very liquidy paint. And the little tubes have a tinier opening on the inside of these. And we'll see, because the white's been my biggest problem. It explodes everywhere, and you can see I'm grabbing hold of the hard part and I'm not trying to squeeze it, and we'll see if we can't get it to not explode. Okay, good. Normally it's catastrophic, as you can see. Because it is so liquidy and these openings are so large, it just pours out. And if you grab a hold of this tube of paint wrong because of the way they stand, everywhere. And I am not a messy painter. You can look at any of these other tubes and see that the caps are, of course I'm gonna open this funky and it'll be the red that'll, I'm not too terribly messy a painter, and I, typically I never get paint on my hands and I don't get paint on my clothes. There's probably a more typical version. But you can see this paint, it likes to come out of the tube. So be very, very careful. And while it's, it's priced pretty decently, it's actually priced kind of cheap. Not that it's a cheap paint, but it's at a much more cost-effective starting point for a lot of beginning artists. And honestly, I wouldn't say it's necessarily beginning artist paint, but if you're just getting started, it's a pretty good paint. Just keep that in mind, that they like to explode and you don't want to waste your paint. I've probably spent more time putting the white back in this tube than I did painting with it. Yellow did it. And blue's not as bad, but it also did it. So, while I love how this design is, if the hole had been just a little bit smaller like it is on the tubes, the paint wouldn't have been so excited to rush out of the tube and get absolutely everywhere. So I think that's pretty much the end of my pros and cons. A lot of my cons, it's just a matter of getting used to the product, as opposed to it is clearly better than this product or it's clearly better than that product. You could use it for all kinds of different paintings, whether if it's toll painting or, landscapes, what have you. Wildlife, doesn't really matter. It's a good paint, and I think it's a really good product from what they sent me. And I greatly enjoyed my time with it, and I just wish they sent me a different red so I could have done a more vivid sunset. Because of the colors that I got, it ended up being an evening, late evening after the sunset had already come down, kind of a painting. And then I had to figure, okay, well, how do I create visual interest, because that sunset's not very visually interesting. So it ended up dictating what I ended up painting, but again, if I bought more product, that wouldn't be the issue. Overall, I think it's a great product. Just one tiny flaw with the cap, but the caps are like super, it takes a lot to open them and they snap good. They're really nice caps, and honestly, I would, if I ever lost a cap on a completely different paint, I would probably unscrew these and keep these and recycle the rest. So DecoArt, I'm sure that a great many of you probably might recognize the brand. When they contacted me, I had no clue who they were. It's like, okay, well, yeah, sure, whatever. I'll review your product. And then when I got it, it's like, oh, I recognize the branding now. I actually use them for a lot of my finishes, my protective layer, clear coats for my paintings. So it's like, oh yeah, okay, I recognize you guys. I just didn't, recognize it in a text form. So it's a pretty decent product. I enjoy it. I think, if you know me and you know some of the products I use, I don't always use the finest of fine paints. When it comes to my watercolors, I use Reeves. A lot of people think, oh, well, that's student paint, and they're surprised that I can get it to do what I get it to do. Like, don't necessarily discount it because it's a budget paint, but don't blame it for your lack of skill in getting it to do what you want it to do. So, yeah, pretty decent product, and if anybody wants me to review any more art products, send me some messages. You canvas makers out there, I always need new canvas, yay. So I think it's a good product, works really well. Now I better shut up about this now. So if you like what you saw, please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what kind of stories you have with this paint. Because again, I was sent the product. If you've gone out and bought it, leave some comments and let other people know what you feel about the product. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching my video, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Bye!